Instagram will make you think Rome was built in a day, and it's not. And even the Rome that is built might not be that nice to be in. So really defining like what, like I said earlier, what is that success piece of an artist that are you really yearning for? Is it you want to feel seen? Is it, which there's nothing wrong with that. You want to feel like you look at your work and like it. You want to feel like someone walks past it and buys it off the wall. You want to feel like it's telling a story that you never seen. Like being really authentic about what you can, what really works for you there, what really makes you tick.
Only a couple months now. I think I recognize her.
Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. Thank you for tuning in to my conversations at the intersection of arts, culture, and community. Today, I am super excited to welcome my next guest, a Washington, D.C. based multidisciplinary artist who captures the humanity of individuals through her vibrant illustrations, murals, and digital art. Please welcome Justine Swindell. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a treat. Like it's one of those things, right? Like as many interviews that I've done and as many times as I've reached out to people, it always gets that spark in me when someone's like, yeah, I'll do your interview. It's like, hell yeah. Like I get a lot of no's, but when
Really?
look, you'd be surprised. It's
Yeah,
like,
man.
I think I'm coming up on the march towards 800 interviews overall in about 5 years, right?
Amazing.
And I think I've probably sent out maybe 2,000 requests. So it's kind of like one of those things. I got about 40%.
That's still good. Those are good numbers.
Yeah, I watch baseball. So that's a pretty good batting average, actually.
100%, 100%.
So again, thank you for coming on, making the time. And for starters, I want to give you the space to introduce yourself. And in that, I found in doing all of these interviews, I found that like, you'll get the artist statement, you'll get the online bio, and there's something missing. There's always something missing that
Always.
the guest or, the person is like, yo, this is really important to me. I was like, oh, right. And the bio is there for simplicity's sake. So I want to give you the space to introduce yourself. Like, who are you? And tell us about your work.
Sure. It's actually a really interesting and timely question because I think a lot of people struggle with it. Anyone who has that multidisciplinary title somewhere in their name means that they like or do a lot of things and they're not fitting into a box very well. So yeah, absolutely. I like to say that we can all be dynamic and not negatively say that we're all over the place. But so I think my dynamic life is something I've been building that includes and is, definitely centered around a love for art that I've had since a child. I come from an artistic family. It's one of the only things I think from a very young age I felt like very true about, like I never had to question. But I'm a kid of DC from the 90s, and I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and I have all these things that have informed the way I like to interact with this world. And a lot of that has led me to a lot of kind of equity and public health work in my lifetime. And so I really think of myself as someone who's toggled between when you think about work as a profession, and studying and being a student of and working in the arts, but also someone that has been a student and a researcher and someone that is also working in kind of health and human experience and life and services. So they've been very much 2 lanes, but my goal, and that's why I say it's timely, is always to intersect them as much as possible, because I think that's kind of where you find your purpose of it.
Yeah.
But that's how I would describe it in the longer way. But in the short way, I'm a multidisciplinary artist who also works in public health.
I love it. Being able to walk both worlds. Almost, I joke about it because I mentioned, sort of, what the day job is. I'm a data analyst by day, and I do this by day and by night. But I
Right.
do this as well. And I remember like one of the first times really sharing that, and people are like, "How do you do both?" I was like, just do it." And but I find that they serve each other. Like
Hmm.
having sort of the data stuff, you can just have hard numbers, and there's no
Yeah.
storytelling around it, and that's a shortcoming. And then on the other side of it, you can have all of this creative energy and but not know the analytics around it when you're looking at funding and things of that
Hmm.
nature, or if it even like makes sense. So being able to have like what appears to be desperate like ideas in that sort of multidisciplinary side of things, or multi hyphenate as I see thrown around as well,
Hmm. The new
seeing
one.
they intersect is important.
Yeah. And I'll say too, from someone who's had time to sit in the industry of the sciences and sit in the industry of business and sit in, institutions and bureaucracy and all those things, you realize that so much of success comes from being creative. Like it's problem solving is creativity, artistry, it's all the same thing. If you watch someone who is an entrepreneur or is, a researcher, you're watching them kind of design a process,
Mm.
and trust it and get through it and create something in the end. And to me that's the same thing of when I'm making an art piece or doing a client piece. So I find the actual existence to be very similar, but I feel like on the outside the way we have to kind of categorize how people are and what budget line they fit into and all that good stuff, then you have to market yourself in these other ways. But it's like when you go in someone's house, you're like, oh, everything is everything I see. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I was always like growing up, I wanted to be in the creative space. I wanted to be a comic book artist or what have you. That was the lane I wanted to be in. And I just remember being in high school. You make those decisions. You're like, all right, what am I going to do? And I remember I was doing the entrepreneurial thing. I was just undercutting our cafeteria. I was like, I'm going to sell candy and I'm going to sell
Yeah.
sodas. And still sketching, still drawing, still writing, things of that nature. And I just remember, it gets to that sort of college stage, and you're thinking like, I got to choose one or the other,
Hmm.
versus trying to make a business out of the sort of like art, like the thing that gives me sort of life or what have you. The business thing was like, this is what's going to feed me, but what's going
Yeah.
to feed my soul was the creative side.
Yeah. 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 It's almost, there's a crisis I think maybe a lot of us artists go through around 23 to 25, area age. I'm in my 40s now. And I have very, very vivid memories of the shifts I was making at that time, deciding between, how I could incorporate art into my career, or how maybe my career should be something else and maybe art shouldn't pay my bills, and having those kind of conversations with myself. And then sometimes the world decides a little bit for you, like life happens and you get pushed in one direction or another. But you can always circle back.
Yeah, and I think this is a version of this as is I'm so happy you mentioned that, where you know I wanted it's a purity, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm self-deprecating about it, but I take this serious. This is my art practice. This is my creative outlet, and I look at it very protective in that way. And when those opportunities present themselves that feel like, hey, let me put this business management sort of mindset on this real quick. I always go back to like, where's the purity in it?
Hmm.
That's the thing that I start looking at, because I've already, to your point, I think I've already been down that road when you're making those decisions of like, all right, I'm about this age. Am I just gonna keep messing around and doing this? And I think where I'm at now, and I think being in sort of the day walker, the two sort of sides of things, it enables me to appreciate both and sustain both, and like have equal footing in both of these ideas, and sort of the business. I don't wear ties, but sort of
Hmm.
that side of things, and then
Yeah.
the I'm at the studio, and and sometimes they clash, but it's always a thing that you're managing, I think.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, the work that I've done, and I've told some of these stories before in other settings about how when art became a business for me, which by the time I did that on my own was something I never thought I would do, was because I was able to fill a gap because of the stuff I learned in my other side of the career. So it's kind of, I don't I didn't plan that per se. If I was going to make art, and I still do it sometimes, it's like I was always just trying to make something aesthetically pleasing, like patterns and things that felt colorful and pretty. But then when you have all this other stuff to say and they start to come together, then next thing you know, you have a style, and
Yeah.
then you have to kind of honor that a little bit.
Yeah. So I want to move into this next question. It's a little bit of a two-parter. Some might
Mhm.
say it's a three-parter as I'm reading it, because I'd be cheating. But so, what are your and I'm going to break it down because I realize I'll ask all three, and you're like, hold on, let me go back for a second. But what are the current mediums that you're working in, and within those mediums, like, do you have like a creative role model or something to that extent? Like, is there someone you're like, I saw this person's work and I was like, I wonder if I can do that, and that's why I now do this. So speak about that a bit.
I feel like sometimes it's cliche because all of when I'm honest with myself, and you talk about that purity, all of my true creative inspiration comes from my childhood inspirations, which back then weren't quite as trendy. So like to be like, say I was inspired by like Warhol, like everyone's like, everybody likes Warhol. But when I was like 11, like that wasn't the thing other 11-year-olds were talking about. And I've been really fortunate to grow up in this, city with all these free museums, and again, come from a family who is practicing art in real time, where my dining room had an easel in it. I might not be able to touch it, but it was infused in my life. So I would say, I my first exhibit that ever moved me, and it moved me because it educated me with the art in a moment when in a way that I would never forget. And I realized the power of it was the Jacob Lawrence exhibit at the Phillips Collection. And I saw it as a kid. And it was probably, my parents didn't buy much things for us. Again, there's five of us. But it was something my dad took me to that museum, and he bought me the gift shop book. So
Yeah.
I have a really special connection to gift shops because they're like this beautiful access to things that are, accessible, like the little postcards and the magnets, like, and they're fine art. So I had that book, and then now that book just is such a part of like my psyche because it was like one of the only things I could flip through.
Yeah.
And the way it told the story of the Great Migration, and then also that's something my grandparents moved from New Orleans to DC in the 30s, and so it was this kind of circular thing that I still comes in my mind. Sometimes I think about that imagery and what it did for me, and I see it in my work. I see the simplicity and some of the storytelling and the symbolism,
Yeah.
not exact same, but like this version of it that comes out, because obviously that's something that's like in there, right? So I say Jacob Lawrence. I honestly did early on have a lot of influence from like the classics, like the Monets and the Manets and all those things, because that was always in front of me, and I did find something very soothing in that work, even though I didn't relate to it.
Yeah.
And so I think my whole practice and inspiration as an artist was always like merging these pieces I felt so much identity with, and then merging this kind of classical beauty I was also looking at, or super modern with that older feel. And I just always kind of wanted to consume some combination of that. So my current contemporary artists usually are doing that. They're doing that in the best of ways. And so that's what I aspire to. But that's my early inspiration from that and the type of art and artist that I was consuming at the time.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. And sort of like I had this second bullet point in there, but you answered it. So see, you're doing well. That's the thing. That's the thing right there. When people let them cook, and then you get your answers. That's what it is. That's
Yeah, try not to be long-winded.
no, 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 no. It makes my job easier. I don't want to hear me. Uh, so let's talk about a bit, in sort of in recent work, sort of what does the process look like when you're working on something, whether it's your personal work, whether it's client based, but sort of what does the process start? And then I definitely got three bullet points after this, but where's the process start for you?
How deep you want to go into that question? Because, artistic process is, if you really think about it, it starts a lot of places. If I'm being honest with myself, so much of my artistic process is revolved around pressure. Pressure of time. Sometimes when I don't have time is when I want to do it the most. It's like some tension inside of me. And so that's when sometimes I get the most inspiration. So sometimes I'll be on a deadline for a client project and then an idea that I want to do comes in my head and then I can't stop thinking about it. And I might be procrastinating, but somehow it works. And then as soon as I finish that project, I can't wait to get it out. Right. So there's a mental component there that I always am thinking about, like, why does that idea come now? And then when I'm freed up, I'm like, it's like, I guess the version of artist writer's block. I can't think of anything to do. But from my physical process, it's evolved over the years. Before the iPad, I did a lot of, the a pencil and ink pens, like Faber-Castell pens was like such a huge part of my like process. And really the meditative process of just like working small. Like I used to work really, really small and use watercolors. And then I did a lot of sketching and shading and drawing. And that was an early part for me. But as time went on, I wanted to shift my style a bit and get more into um, getting myself. I liked graphic style kind of work and illustration, but I was very much a realist drawer and painter, which I think a lot of people are when they've been trained in that at some point, because that's like the fundamentals, and it's hard to unlearn it a little bit. So a lot of my work is now just dealing with shapes, dealing with basic composition, spending a lot of time on that. Um, and so I have sketchbooks and stuff full of just kind of basic shapes and interactions and things that I'm looking at and figuring out how they fit together. Kind of like collaging. I feel like there's a mental and physical collaging I'm doing a lot in my process, whether even digitally, I'm moving things around and I'm moving references around until something kind of clicks.
Yeah.
I'm usually waiting for something to click. Sometimes it takes longer than I want it to. And so I kind of I've described to people as, you have those globes with the snow in it.
Yeah.
That I usually like the snow is all my ideas and ingredients, and I'm like shaking it up and then looking to see where it lands. Like, I don't like it that much. Shake it up again, looking to see where it lands. And so that's like a big part of my process. And at some point I'm like, I kind of like that. And I move on to stage two. So, and then so forth and so on. So, I mean, that's kind of a more, I guess, theoretical response to the question. On a very physical, technical side of things, I now really sketch with my iPad mainly. I do a lot of, kind of mood boarding and sketching there. And then I'm thinking about the story I want to tell. I often think about a very basic word of the story I'm trying to tell.
Mm.
If it's something that feels, what is like soft and large, and like when you start thinking and looking up those words, what comes up,
Yeah.
because so much of art is getting that very basic reaction that people don't even understand why they're reacting to it. So I do a lot of kind of deconstructing in the early stage, and then I build against that until I get to a piece that I like.
Thank you. Now to come with the other pieces that, see, you were talking about going deep. I'm gonna go deeper into it now.
Oh, snap. Okay.
So is there in these sort of areas, like, is there music? Is there a color? Is there any like activities that help stimulate sort of like creativity? For instance, I know when I'm in the ideation phase, I'm sitting here, I'm looking at other interviews, I'm looking at the bios of the guests. And sometimes if I'm like stuck, I throw on classical music, something with no lyrics.
Mhm.
It just kind of helps it helps my brain snow, if you will, fall into the
Mhm.
right places.
Mhm. Um, it's a mix. So I do two types of music usually. Like I have this like kind of like house R&B mix that I play. And so it's like kind of like soul groovy
Yeah.
music that I play. And I use that more so when I'm a little getting more in the groove. But sometimes I put it on just to kind of like set the tone and get me a little out of my head. So I like to, people who know me, I like to put on some throwback music from the 90s or whatever. And that usually is just like a sure gateway to just shift energy, get back to basics, and try to get to, the feelings that make you kind of create what you want to create.
Yeah.
So those are definitely my go-tos. But I do a lot in silence too, interestingly enough, not on purpose, often because music, something might run out and I'm not good at breaking and going back to turn something back on. And next thing you know, it's 2 hours later and I'm still kind of sucked in.
Yeah.
But yeah, to get started, and a lot of it too is like I need a clean set space. Like I'm someone that really has to feel like I set the stage
Yeah.
to begin working, even if it's a small space. It's not about it being big. It's just about it feeling very intentional. And that I really do create some warm-ups for myself. It's always frustrating. I'm sure it's like this with writing and everything you do too. It's like there's nothing more frustrating than having like a session of art making and it just feels like ugh, like that
Yeah.
didn't turn into anything. But then also accepting that that's like part of the deal. Like you're not gonna sit down every time and have that magical thing crank out. So you have to know that it's like you said, you talked earlier about the number of rejections. There's a lot of your own, you know, wrongs that have to happen before you get the right, and you have to give time for that. And I definitely build that into my process when I have a client.
It's a good direction that we're heading in because it's this sort of next part of this question. Because like I said, there's multiple parts to this one.
Mhm.
Like for me, I I hate starting. It's
Yeah.
like, again, in doing this, I've gotten better at it, but in the past, it would be these awkward sort of like, all right, how do we engage in conversation? Hi, I am Rob, and it feels so weird and stilted, and it sets up the dynamic oddly. Or even when I'm doing something, let's say potentially for a client, like hosting a thing, or even doing any research, like doing the preparation for it, setting the stage and prepping. Um, but once I'm like past it, and maybe it's the warm up thing for me that I should be looking into. But once I get past sort of those first few, it's like, again, baseball, it's like, all right, I took a few swings and misses here, but I'm here now. I got a hit.
Mm.
But again, I hate starting. I find it really challenging.
Yeah.
Which part of your process do you find to be the most difficult?
I mean, I probably with you. Starting is really hard. I actually did a print series of like these kind of mock Pantones that was like just start, trust the process, and finish strong
Yeah.
because it's like each of them I get tripped up on, and that just starting piece is sometimes just not even enough because I have a lot of just starts that I should have probably kept going a little bit longer.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh, I want to bail. I start worried, oh, I don't have enough time. This isn't working. Let me try again. And that's that constant decision making. So like you, I think I really have a hard time with that with my own work, particularly. With client work, there's something else that kicks in. I think it's because limitations really help us make decisions. And usually I'm doing things that I'm already super comfortable with, but then when I'm doing personal work, I'm experimenting. I'm sometimes trying things I haven't done before. So I have to kind of wear two different hats, give myself grace in different ways, for each one. But yeah, I'm probably the same as you. That one's, I'm dealing with it right now. So,
Yeah. I mean, and even in doing this, like I had an interview maybe 2 weeks ago, and I generally try, and I fail often, but I try to keep the interviews to, 30 to 40 minutes or what have you. And, the goal is not for it to be the end all. This is to be a entry point into the story of the guest coming on. It's like, this isn't the exhaustive conversation. This isn't the full expose, right?
mhm.
And I find often if I'm left to my own devices, like 2 weeks ago, I did the longest interview I've ever done. I was like, yo, this was 2 hours. And I said in the email, like, yeah, it'll be 45 minutes. We'll be done. But we just kept rolling.
Yeah.
And the thing about it, my guest was an Aquarius. I'm an Aquarius. And we are just like, yeah, man, let's weird off real quick. And just
Mhm.
going down that rabbit hole and getting deep into it. It was a very good conversation, but it was longer than normal. So at times having that, I would call it, for lack of a better term, the governor around
Hmm.
is can be really useful. Like if somebody reaches out, like, yo, can you do a 20-minute podcast? Or these are the here's your lane, here's your parameters.
Yeah.
I can make that happen. And I know how
Yeah.
to sort of self-edit. So rejection, I'm interested in that.
Mhm.
Like has rejection, whether it be, sort of that the doubt component, 'cause I think that's a version of rejection, but has
Mhm.
rejection ever affected your creative process? And if so, could you explain how you coped?
I've definitely pivoted at times. I think the hardest thing is with rejection is to figure out what to what to shift, what to alter, or if you should alter at all, and it was just the wrong situation. So I definitely can get into my own analysis paralysis of a of a situation when something doesn't work out, or and it's not even just rejection. Sometimes it's like not being invited to the thing, or not being asked to be a part of something that is happening in in an art space, and you wonder, oh, is my work not a good fit for this reason or that reason, and you start to wonder. But for the most part, I find that it will bother me probably more just the feeling of it. But once I'm past it. I'm kind of a have a pity party and move on kind of person. Especially because usually it ends up being a benefit anyway. I mean, this work takes a lot of time, and if someone's not like fully in, or if it's not a fully beneficial situation, there's things I wish I had rejected and said no to at times, because it ended up taking up more of my energy than it should have. And so I'm very much at a space where I'm able to match myself with clients and kind of curate the experience to the way that I like to work. And it took me a long time to sort through that. It took me, yeah, it's years to kind of get to the place where I knew that kind of sweet spot of a good client project. Because nowadays it's not, we're interviewing each other at this point. That's also one of the important liberties I like to have about being an artist right now, is that I can make some decisions, and I've looked back at years and said, oh, I wish I'd made more time for these other kind of clients, and that maybe those two or a few, especially because I do commercial illustration work sometimes, they just drained me, and I didn't get to really, do some of the stuff I really wanted to do, or even say yes to a project that was less money but would have been more fulfilling.
Yeah.
And so each time I try to annually assess my rejection, exception experiences, and look at them against what I enjoy doing, and the monetary factors and the time factors. And yeah, I don't look at it by itself. I usually look at it in relationship to all those other things, and then decide from there um, how to feel about it.
That's important. And I think when we're working, we have so many different things that come in our direction, whether it be personal things, personal interests, whether it be clients, whether it be opportunities to be in the sort of art life, the creative life.
Yeah.
You have to do that assessment. I have, like, a rubric that I utilize of, does this fit?
Mhm.
There are I've gotten, teaching gigs, which is a different layer to add into sort of what the isness of my sort of day to day and in working this in. And, over the years, I had to really step back from how often I was recording. Like
Yeah.
it was one year I recorded almost an episode a day. And with the day job and with all
Yeah.
the other responsibilities for the day to day, and part of it is just like I'm very interested in it, I enjoy it, and so on. But it's like, all right, maybe you should trim that down. So it's slowly like coming off of the gas, if you will,
Mhm.
to explore like the things that I'm interested in, obviously, in doing these interviews and working with folks and really systematizing that process. Because,
Right.
at a point, it was very much you're dealing with me directly. Now it's like you're dealing with the Calendly. You figure out a date. I'm not going to handhold it because it was too much time going towards it. So if an opportunity comes up and presents itself, it's kind of like that's that strategy. Does this fit? Like, give me all of the details and I'll let you know if I want it, versus, yeah, we got this thing for you. You got to take it because it's good for you. And I
Right.
think a lot of times those things are presented because we're trying to get out there, we're trying to grow, we're trying to be invited to these different events and these different opportunities. And those things are put out there like carrots a lot too, especially when you're in sort of the I think the creative mindset and the business mindset, one is taking over a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to decide what success looks like. I mean, I think the reason why we can all be successful is because it means something different to everybody. You know, some people just want to have their work seen on a wall or on a billboard, and some people don't want anyone to see them, but they want to have, a bunch of passive income that's hitting their account. And you have to be honest with yourself, just like anything you want in this world, a relationship or whatever it is, that you're clear on the things that make you the most happy in your practice in life. And and it's very easy to start steering because the ship is, the current's pulling you in one direction. And that's okay too, because then you find your new limit, like, oh no, I don't want to go that far anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. So,
Yeah.
or, it's sparingly. So yeah, I mean, especially as a multidisciplinary artist, there's lots. I say that, but there was a time where I did like so many different types of things. And then I just realized I only had the capacity to do certain styles. And again, evaluation of time and energy um, has always kind of served me um, to make sure that I walk away from projects feeling like fulfilled and like proud of them, and not like, ugh, like that was not, I'm glad it happened, but I don't know if that was worth it. I don't know if I would have said yes if, you know, I knew it would turn out like this. And that's part of the deal. But again, you get better at narrowing it down.
Yeah, and even in doing this, a consideration I have in mind when I have someone come on, like you're a busy person, you have life, you have a creative project, you have all of these different things. So if you're going to come on and spend an hour with me, I'm going to do my best not to waste your time, make this feel like it's a fulfilling and interesting and enriching conversation, or at minimum, just I make an ass out of myself and you find it kind of fun. I don't know, but it is a thing. And
Yeah.
you know, I try to look at all of this like, there are times when I'll have folks on, I have emerging artists, I have well-established artists come on, and in these conversations, sometimes we go deep and sometimes we go really deep into sort of the thinking behind the work and behind like their creative life. And, you know, one of the things I'm very mindful of is like, and I've had this happen, not on a podcast, but in live and in person. It was a situation I was trying to set up to help an artist get their work out there in a different way and really just trying to figure it out there, like help have them showcase a film.
Hmm.
And sometimes people don't show up and no one
Hmm.
showed up. And that artist, sort of in that mindset was like, I think I'm going to change my career trajectory, like literally almost in real time.
Hmm.
And I just felt really bad and I was really disappointed, not really at him per se, but more so like this didn't work out in this ideal way. And I felt like some ownership for it. Like, wow, this is a little bit my fault. I felt bad about it, and so when I do this, I have that sort of same care for it. Like, I don't want to ask like a goofy question or make someone think like, and maybe I'm not that good. I want to be like, really like, so tell me about your work. Tell me about it and tell me about the ideas in it and really have them, have you all like, really, really dive into what your work's about.
Hmm.
Yeah,
No, yeah, it's trial and error, right?
absolutely. So in in sort of where we're discussing, I want to hear a bit about like creative goals. Again,
Hmm.
like I don't know about you, but we get into that part of the year where I get the performance review, and it's like, yes, Rob, you didn't hit this, this, and this year. I'm like, all right,
Mm.
and I have to do that in my own creative thing where I'm the manager, and I'm like, all right, how many episodes did I put out this year? How do I feel about this season? So
Yeah.
when do you create sort of goals where it's like I'm going to work with this many clients, work on this many projects? How do you go about that, and how do you feel about sort of the outcomes? Like, is it you feel bummed if you did like half of what you set out for? Do you feel like really, really like satisfied when you're done, like, okay, I was going to do 10, I did 15, I really crushed it? Talk a bit
Mhm.
about those goals.
Yeah. For me, it's definitely become a quality over quantity. And I mean quality, I mean like having projects that meet that Venn diagram of like they pay well and they're interesting and look fun to do. And, I feel confident that I can accomplish them in a period of time. So like with client work, I'd always aim for those kind of things. And I had to kind of learn the types of projects that happens for me with. But I've about a year or so ago, I during the pandemic particularly, and also because I had young kids, I really shifted hardcore to more illustration because of the ease of it.
Sure.
Being able to work digitally just opened me up to a whole lot more opportunities, and it was something that doesn't require cleanup, and I could do it through the night, and I could just stay plugged in. I'm good, right? So that was a huge factor in kind of my goal setting for a while. And I set those goals based from then, just based on finding clients that I felt like, were businesses that, had certain types of budgets that were looking for, certain kinds of like marketing campaigns, things that were temporary, because that's usually where you can have the most fun. Like I stopped doing logos, I stopped doing like a lot of brand identity work because it's so deeply invested for a client that that aware me. So I started setting these goals about around like marketing campaigns, like one-off illustrations that were again with interesting clients and had some decent pay against them. But then about a year ago, I just had this itch, and I was like, I'm at origin, as I talked to at the beginning of the podcast, like I'm a drawer and a painter, like with my hands.
Sure.
And I started to get a little burnt on the digital side of things. And I was kind of craving the making again. And the way I've done the past is like I'll throw a mural in here and there, and that usually that'll wear me out and and give me my fix. But I mean, I've talked about this actually on another podcast about understanding, my service side of myself and my product side of myself, so to speak, in business terms. And when I'm offering something and how I want to offer it out to the world, and when I'm creating certain things, there's a different reward. It's not a sure thing. I like the illustration because it's a sure thing. It's like low overhead, and it's like I can time it out, and and I got that down. And so after I got that down, I was like, I want to go back and I want to start figuring out how I want to create art again in like as far as like the product space and hanging on the walls and in collaboration with other things. And I want to work with other makers, and I want to be in that conversation of creating with people. I want to make time to connect with people like right now. I want more of that because that kind of work I was doing, I was getting more and more isolated, and I was missing out of that part of art that I love so much, which is like being and engaging with people. So I made a very intentional decision to, get a physical space, which I have down on 8th Street near Howard, and buy a lot more materials and bring all my mural stuff there and just start creating intentional space for that. But, with tying the whole conversation together, it's also been really hard. It's like all these ideas in my head that I haven't had time to do. And then I sit up to do them, and they're going left, they're going right, they're going up, they're going down, and I'm going through that. It's almost like starting over again a little bit, because I've been out of practice of doing a series or doing collections and things of that nature. So I think right now I'm trying to give myself a lot of grace in that space, but it's definitely a goal that I've set that I'm still looking at.
Yeah.
Sometimes feels even stronger than my illustration work, is wanting to get over this little hump with how I want to get in a rhythm with creating with my hands again, and figuring out the tools that I like using most. I used a lot of ink and watercolor in the past. I've been getting back into acrylics and oils and things I just haven't touched in a long time. And I realized like you really do have to keep doing it, or you start to forget some of the techniques, so to speak. And so I'm kind of taking myself back to school a little bit, and hoping that the discipline of that will eventually lead to some collections of work that I'll be excited to share.
Yeah. Being able to, and thank you, being able to, kind of go back and forth into sort of like, all right, let me use, okay, digital, we got that. All right, hands, we got that. And really being able to have, or manual or what have you, but have one, or analog, have one kind of serve the other. I think it kind of helps in some ways rewire and ignite those synapses in our minds. Like, generally when I do this in my home studio, and it's very easy, it's very smooth. But sometimes when I go out and inevitably there's a certain degree of difficulty there. Either the studio isn't set up the way that it should be, or even on me, I think I do it intentionally just to, make myself like think a little bit harder. But 'cause you get on autopilot sometimes,
Hmm.
but you know, I'll forget me. It's like, damn, I don't have batteries. I'm sure there's a cable here I can connect and do this. And it's just a MacGyver situation. And I find because the problem solver thing, because I'm in that mindset, I almost get rid of my questions and go full improv. And the conversation is now on that different level because it's just like, it's still that curiosity because you can't fake curiosity, you can't fake
Right.
interest, all of that, but it's now I'm approaching it in a bit of a different way, and I'm not as relaxed. And I think going back to one of the things you touched on earlier, the pressure piece is there. Just
Yeah.
like, I don't want to screw this up, man. I mean, I got this person here that literally looking at me in my face. I can smell their breath. They can smell mine. So yeah, it's something which brings me to my last two real questions, and you will not escape the rapid fire questions. They are coming for
Okay. No,
you
I'm
fast
here.
and furious.
I'm here.
So this next question, I'm a notes guy. I have so many notepads. I've got like, notes from a hotel I was in a couple weeks ago with questions on there, just musings and thoughts. And I jot down ideas for podcasts. I jot down ideas for questions. They are in many ways my breadcrumbs. Especially when I get stuck, like if I'm
Hmm.
coming up with questions, it's like, I like this person's work. I see the bio, but something's not quite clicking.
Hmm.
And do you leave yourself like breadcrumbs when you're like you're kind of stuck, you're working through something, you're like, let me look at a reference. Let me, is there something that you use in that way to find your way back?
Oh yeah. I mean, and half of it's because I live a kind of crazy life where I have, I got kids, I got older parents, I got all kinds of things going on. And my mind sometimes is completely on my art, but I can't physically do it. And I have to actually sometimes be like, Justine, be present, like you're at the playground. But I keep I have my phone. I actually have terrible handwriting, so leaving myself notes has never been good. And people are always like, "How are you a creative person with bad handwriting?" I'm like, I don't understand it, but I'm not writing things down never worked for me, but I keep Google Notes in my phone, and I have just all these categories in there. And I need to do that because when I do sit down to make something and I'm feeling a little bit blank, like I need to go back to those notes and be like, okay, what did you say about, a theme you want to look at, or even just like what, reference images I want to make sure I'm capturing. It's kind of like giving myself a to-do list a bit, and making sure that when you have those little sparks that happen that you don't lose them, because you do lose them. You're kind of like, oh, what was that thing I was thinking about earlier? And
Right.
it's so frustrating. So yeah, I that has been my central place of doing that. And yeah, I go back to it. If I'm sitting on the couch watching TV, I might leave stuff there, and I try to categorize them based on the types of things that I'm working on. Yeah, I'm a Pinterest person too. I like a good mood board, or I like to drop images in and go back. Sometimes I look at boards I made like 10 years ago, sometimes be like, oh, that's what I was into. Like I really liked that style, or I was really saved a lot of like plant pictures, didn't I? Like there's a lot of plants in here. And then I'm like, oh, so there's those things. And then, pictures I take with my own phone. So those are my breadcrumbs.
And this is the last one, and this is in the vein of like advice, what have you. There's been some gems that people have been listening. You've been
Hmm.
dropping a few gems or what have you, and it's just like you don't have to listen too hard. They're right there. So
Hmm.
what advice would you give an emerging artist about navigating the business side of sort of the art world or what have you? Like how you approach it with, as we've been discussing during the crux of this conversation, the dual nature of things.
So, my work is as an entrepreneur right now. When I came into art, I actually worked on the production side, working more in actually a lot of animation work. I was living out in Los Angeles, and I'm one of those people that got an opportunity pretty young, like pretty fresh out of college, to be in like the industry, so to speak.
Sure.
And I left it, and I had a lot of feelings about that. And sometimes I still do. I wonder, oh, if I had stayed in that space, right? And so part of advice I give to younger people is also how to give to my younger self is just that, figuring out the right way that you like to do art has to be a constant. Like your personal practice has to be preserved.
Yeah,
And then you have to identify that if art's going to be something that is going to bring monetary value or is going to be something that you want to brand or, participate in the commerce world with. It's two very different things that you allow yourself to explore what that looks like. And for some people it comes quickly and some people it might not. But, the Instagram will make you think Rome was built in a day, and it's not. And even the Rome that is built might not be that nice to be in. So really defining like I said earlier, what is that success piece of an artist that are you really yearning for? Is it you want to feel seen? Is it, which there's nothing wrong with that.
sure.
You want to feel like you look at your work and like it. You want to feel like someone walks past it and buys it off the wall. You want to feel like it's telling a story that you never seen. Like being really authentic about what you can what really works for you there, what really makes you tick. And I've done a couple of talks at workshops with not just like regular artists, but like with actors and people at schools. And the one thing I always preach to those younger emerging artists is that use creativity as a surface. Like if you're making art and you want someone else to feel something, then know that you have to do them a service. It's like the reason we like watching movies is not because it's our exact experience. Like I'm not watching a Western because I've lived in the Western times. I'm watching because there's a piece of that story that's like pulling me in and it's bringing something to me. And that's what a director's trying to do. They're trying to, it could be an alien, like, it could be something, a dog talking, whatever it is, but it's like it's playing on a very intimate experience that someone has that they might feel, whether it's loss or love or being dismissed or whatever it might be. And so I think as artists, you're always going to win when you can figure out that way that someone else finds something in your work that serves them, that helps them either heal or helps them feel joy or helps them, just helps them buy something, whatever it is. It's like, what is the purpose you want it to be? And the purpose can be just for you.
Yeah.
That's okay too. But if you want art out in the world, like what is it giving? And I think that's the work. That's the endless work. But I think the earlier you start having that conversation with yourself, the more you can be authentic about your process.
Thank you. It's a great answer. That's a very full answer. I like that. And I think those are considerations. And upon re-listening to this episode, I know that I'm going to really think about that a bit more into how I approach what I do. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So now we got all the real thoughtful, smart, intellectual-ish. It's me. You're the one doing all the work. I'm just dragging it down, sandbagging. But I got a couple questions for you, rapid fire
Okay.
questions. Don't overthink these. And for the first two of these, for the first one, I use use in these words, the letter use in these words. So you'll get it in a second.
Okay.
What are your favorite three colors?
Blue, orange, and pink.
Okay. And those were where the U's were at in colors and favorite because I'm bougie. um, so you mentioned like sort of music earlier, right? So definitely, what's the first like house music jam that comes to mind for you? I'm thinking Jungle Brothers, but
Oh, okay. It's not gonna work because I honestly I don't even know. The thing about house music, it's about DJs and some of the stuff that has been like scraped up over time. And so if I tell you right now, my favorite mix is from a time of CDs. I used to live in Harlem, New York,
Yep.
and I there was a CD guy that used to come in the hair salon that I was in all the time, and he knew the hairstylist, and he also liked that music. And one day he came and he brought me these burned CDs. This is, when a CD was a good thing to have, and it had handwriting on it, and it was a Soul House CD.
Nice.
And I still to this day look for some of those songs, and they were just these hybrid mixes of like Whitney Houston, Jill Scott songs, all these things with these like layers on it
Yeah.
that I would clean my house something my apartment at the time, something so good, putting that on every day. And so I don't even know the names of those DJs, but from that's like the magical gold mine over there. But I like a good, neo soul mix otherwise, that's always fun.
Yeah, you definitely set the stage. I felt like I was there at that hair salon. I'm bald. So
Listen, I'm back there in my mind. It was a time.
here's the next one. I'm very curious about sort of, well, the next two are in this vein. I'm curious about sort of the habits and sort of superstition. So first off, habits. So
Mhm.
how many hours sleep do you generally get?
Um, Post kids, I get about 6 to 7 hours of sleep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same. Yeah, no kids, but same.
Yeah. I mean, not that's like some days, no, some days I'm pushing it, and if I have a deadline, no, but I'm a night person for sure.
Yeah,
Like I get so much done between 9 p.m. and midnight.
yeah,
And then if I have a deadline, I'll push it till 2 or 3,
yeah.
and it's solid. Like I get solid stuff done during that time. So sometimes I try to actually balance my deadline so that if I do feel tired, I can be like, you don't have to do one of those late nights. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I think on average it ends up being like 6 or 7.
Yeah, I've been doing like 6 or 7 myself. And if I find I do the early move where I can get up at about 4:30
No, I
and
can't do that.
do the gym first thing in the morning.
Mm,
I try to get that knocked out, and I find like, and this is the thing as I was, sharing with you before we got started, sort of what the early morning was like for me today. Just me and several of my peers were like, why aren't there coffee shops open at 5? Why can't we, just do that? And I would like that as well because I got a lot of work done in coffee shops. I'll have that notepad with me sometimes, maybe my laptop, but generally the notepad is something about, I don't have great handwriting, but I can remember what I wrote.
mm,
And but I think it's something about being there and having that sort of like the black coffee. I just feel like I'm accomplishing things. And
yeah.
I usually pick in preparation for these interviews. Like I was literally writing questions for you last week. I was on the train coming back from New York, and I was just like, all right, so Justine, and that's usually how it goes. And I have to be in that sort of setting, but coffee is a part of it, and sort of those early morning or hours where there's minimal interruption, I suppose.
Yeah. No, makes sense.
Here's the last one.
Oh,
And this is in a similar vein.
okay.
What's a superstition, habit, or routine that you swear by as an artist? And I always look for the really weird ones, the ones that's like, look, I gotta have, this meal, like how baseball players have like superstitions. It's like, look, I wear the same socks for a month and I got hits every day.
Yeah, not like that. But
Yeah, of course not.
like I changed my socks. I Oh, that's tough. I'm like, I would say so, I mentioned earlier I like a clean, kind of fresh space. I mean, I think routine, I don't know if it's a superstition, but I do the thing where I light a candle. I do the thing where I'm a tape a counter wiper. Like before I do anything, like even if that's like a laptop on my laptop or whatever, like I have a kind of ceremonious like wipe down, and then like I like to aesthetically like place if it's like a water or coffee or the candle and all the things in this way. And sometimes I think it's procrastination because it'll start taking more time than it should. But I love to like kind of create like a pretty picture. It's almost like I'm making a drawing, pre-drawing, or for even if I'm writing emails like of the space. It's how I like to um kind of like kick things off. And so, yeah, if I'm at a table at my desk, I do that. If I'm in the studio, I do it too. Even if I'm painting on canvas, I'm like, I have to like wipe the counter down
Yeah.
and like be like, okay, now we can paint.
Now the main event can start. I can wipe down the counter.
Exactly. Otherwise, I'm looking over there like,
I use my microfiber cloths. We are good to go.
There's so many.
So that's pretty much it for the podcast. So there are two things that I would like to do in these final moments. One, I would like to thank you for coming on to the podcast. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah.
And two, I would like to invite and encourage you to share with the listeners where they can check you out, social media, website, shameless plug away, if you will. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I think the best place to find me, what I'm doing in real time, is on my Instagram, and that's at Justine Swindell Art. So my first name, last name, Art. And I do have a website, www.JustineSwindell.com, which has a little bit more of my historic portfolio and a little background information. But I try to, I'm not always super active, but I try to get on Instagram and at least share the latest and greatest and communicate with people and, put some stuff in my stories here and there.
Thank you. And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Justine Swindell for coming on to the podcast and sharing a bit of her journey. And for Justine Swindell, I am Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You just have to look for it.